Welcome to Bring It Home. I'm Dave McIntyre, Director of the Integrative Center for Homeland Security, and here on Bring It Home we try to take concepts of homeland security and national security and bring them home to you. We've been talking about waging conventional war, and this is the second in a series of short lectures talking about that subject. Last time we made the point that war is complex and vital. It is life and death for a nation. It shouldn't be waged for trivial causes. And this is the link between what's happening overseas, national security, and homeland security. We also addressed briefly the idea of selecting a national strategy. Think about a political strategy, then a military strategy, economic and then military strategy. Remembering what is a strategy, a theories of cause and effect that will achieve victory against a thinking enemy over time. Never forgetting this definition of victory, not getting everything you want, but getting what you're willing to settle for at a price you're willing to pay, and always remembering that your strategies must consider domestic forces, those people at home. Now this is an interesting point, I think, on where can you target your strategies? What are you targeting against? And interestingly enough, there are really only 6 target categories. Clausewitz said that wars are a balance of, or between passion and chance and reason. And a better way to think about that is a passion between the people and the capabilities that the people bring to war, and that would be all the logistics capabilities, manufacturing capabilities, and so forth. Forces, that's the military, and the leadership, both political and military. And each of those can be attacked in 2 ways. You can attack their actual capability, go after the manufacturing base, for example. Go after the forces and destroy them in the field. Actually try to bring down, find and track down their leaders. Or you can attack their will, convince them to stop fighting because of losses or because something else is at risk. So really when you think about waging war, there are really only 6 sorts of target sets out there: the people, the forces, and the leaders, and you can attack either their capability or their will. Now, you want to array against them a national strategy that uses your political power. And these are just some examples. It may be just a matter of collecting power. It may be a matter of working with other people in order to balance power against an enemy who's maybe stronger than you individually. You may want to talk about collective security, where several people sign on to put their fortunes at risk together. NATO is an example of collective security. International regimes like the UN or international law can be a form of political power. So is hegemonic stability, where you try to collect a large number of smaller nations under. All of these are ways that you may collect and use national power. You also want to think about economic power. And here, we're not going to try to give you an entire economic lesson in 60 seconds, but here are just some things to think about. Some people really focus just internally, what they can produce, their own resources, a program of mercantilism. Others try to control trade overseas through colonialism, or by saying we're going to export raw materials or export manufacturers' goods and import raw materials. Liberalism says free trades and market will make us even better. Socialism tries to control trade through Marxism, and so forth. You have to think about your economic strategy. Now, this is the most detailed. This is the issue of military strategy. And boy, there are a lot of choices to deal with here. You can think about attrition, which is sort of nibbling away at the enemy, or annihilation, which is overwhelming force. Attrition, nibbling away, is what happened in the First World War, where the Germans and the French both said we can stand more casualties than they can. Annihilation is where you try to crush them, as for instance with the Blitzkrieg. You might try to disrupt the leadership or paralyze it. You might try exhaustion. Frequently that's used against democracies, where they have low levels of casualties, but for a long period of time, and the people at home just get tired of it. Asymmetric versus symmetric attack. Are you going to have your forces directly against their forces, or some way maneuver around them? For example, use an aircraft carrier against a land-based enemy who can't protect himself. Would you attack the sinews of war? For example, their logistics or production facilities, or find just some node of that sinew, like for example oil production or the railroads. Air Force theorists have talked about the war of the rings, where you leap over the forces in the field and get at the leadership. Or precision war, where you say, I know precisely the targets I want to go after that will bring down the enemy, and I want to attack them precisely. Sequential or cumulative war. You know, the Navy in World War II was trying to fight sequential war. One major battle, another major battle, another major battle. But actually the submarine force was fighting cumulative wars. Sink a ship every day, and you eventually bring the enemy to bay. The point is, you can understand that there are a variety of military strategies which you can learn and then apply. You've got to carefully consider them in the whole context that we discovered in the last edition of Waging Conventional War. Lastly, we should mention that then it's time to do the military business. And this is what the military does for a living. Balance those forces. More Air Force or more Army. More tanks or more infantry. Balance the force with logistics. Do we want a big pile of stuff we can't use, or do we need to worry about running out because we haven't created enough? How do we raise, train, and equip the forces? How many divisions do we need? What doctrine will we develop? How will we maneuver on the battlefield? What tactics, techniques, and procedures? And then finally, how do we develop leadership and command? After we've taken all this into account, the first lesson where we talked about the context and the nature and the purpose of war, and this lesson where we've talked about specific techniques of war, then we ask this question, what if the enemy has an entirely different logic or different rules? And that is where we go to the concept of terrorism, because that's exactly what takes place. If you have a force or a military or a country that's used to waging conventional war, which is what we've been talking about here, and they understand the rules and they understand the mechanism, they're likely to find themselves at a great disadvantage in waging war against someone who doesn't use those rules or those techniques or those tactics at all. And once again, that's where national security and homeland security come together. You'll learn more if you stay with us on Bring It Home.